Hey there, would you dare to leave your knight hanging for 7 moves, knowing that it can be taken each time? Today I will share a game that when I first saw it, I just couldn't believe my eyes. So here we have former world champion Garry Kasparov playing as black against Viktor Korchnoi. I have already spoken about Viktor Korchnoi in a recent video that I published. But in any case, let me share a few more things about this amazing player. He was still quite strong at his oldest days. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2016 at the age of 85, but he was the oldest person ever to be ranked among the top 100 players. And at the time of this Olympiad, he was facing a very young Garry Kasparov, who was just 19 years old, and he was representing Switzerland at this game because he had left what was then the Soviet Union. So let's get started with the game. After d4 and knight to f6, c4, g6, here Korchnoi played the move g3, and after bishop to g7, bishop to g2, here Kasparov played the move c5. Black definitely had other options like castling or going d6, for example going for a king's Indian defense, but the move c5 is an interesting alternative, fighting for the center straight away, and here white played the principled d5. Just want to mention that here taking on c5 doesn't win a pawn because after queen to a5, black gives a check and easily gets the pawn back. So after c5, d5 makes a lot of sense, and after d6 and knight to c3, here we get a pawn structure that will lead the game into the Benoni defense, where white gets a space advantage on the center, and here black castled, and after knight to f3 and e6, black wants to counterattack on the center. Here white castle, white normally wants to keep this very strong pawn on d5, and after pawn takes and pawn takes, black played the move a6, planning to go b5, gaining space on the queen side, and here in this position white pretty much always avoids this idea by going a4, and here black played the move rook to e8, after trading on d5, now black gets this semi-open file for the rook, and here white played the move knight to d2, which if you're not familiar with this position might look a bit strange, but the idea is to overprotect the e4 square, and white has ideas to go e4, gaining more space on the center. Just want to mention that in addition to knight to d2, here the move bishop to f4 is quite an interesting move, just developing the bishop, eyeing the d6 pawn, and here black already has to be a bit careful because playing a natural developing move like knight b to d7 would simply hang the pawn on d6. So here after knight to d2, Kasparov continued with knight b to d7, and here black played the move h3, and after rook to b8, this is again a very common move in this position, just planning to go b5, and one common way to fight against that is to go a5, but knight to c4 is also a strong move in this position because it has the threat of taking the pawn on d6. That's why here black played the move knight to e5, attacking the knight, and now the queen is defending on d6. And here white played another move, which if you see it for the first time might look a bit weird, which is the move knight to a3. Taking on e5 is definitely possible, and after rook takes, we get a fairly balanced position, but here since white has a space advantage, in general the side having a space advantage wants to keep pieces on the board, so that the other side cannot maneuver easily. That's why the move knight to a3 is a fairly interesting move, even though the knight goes to the edge of the board. First of all, it prevents b5 by black, and additionally now white has the idea of going f4, pushing the knight away, which as we'll see the whole game will revolve around this idea. So after f4, if the knight retreats, then white can bring the knight back to c4. And taking this into account, Kasparov played the very strong move knight to h5. So this anticipates the idea of f4, here white played the move e4, but the point is that after f4, this pawn on g3 would be hanging, so here black has the idea to take on g3, and even though white can capture the knight on e5, now black can capture the rook on f1, and we get a very complicated position, which is very often what players who play the Benoni defense aim for, to get complications over the board. So here after knight to h5, Korchnoi played the move e4. I just want to mention that g4 is another idea, but here black has this idea of sacrificing a minor piece for the initiative, something that we'll see later in the game. For example, here after knight to f6, if white goes f4, black can take on g4, and after pawn takes and knight takes, black gave a minor piece for 2 pawns, so black is not giving a lot, but now black will have ideas to go queen to h4, bishop to d4, so this position is already quite dangerous for white. So here Korchnoi played the move e4, which as we discussed is one of white's main ideas, controlling the center. And here Kasparov played the move rook to f8, which was quite risky, so the rook will come to f8. The idea is that after f5, the f file will be opened, and the rook might be better placed on f8. Just want to mention that the move bishop to d7 has been played in this position. It's more direct, probably safer, just planning to go b5 straight away. But if that had been played, we probably wouldn't have this amazing game. So after rook to f8, Korchnoi played king to h2, overprotecting the pawn on g3 with the idea to go f4 later on. So here Kasparov followed his plan by going f5, and here Korchnoi played the move f4. So now we get the critical position where, spoiler alert, black will leave this knight on the e5 square for 7 moves. And I'm not sure if Kasparov did this because he couldn't find any better alternatives, or because he was just a very young and brave player, because here retreating the knight, first of all to f7 wouldn't make a lot of sense to place a rook on f8 and have a knight on f7, and here white can simply take on f5, and white has tactical problems here. For example, taking with the g-pawn would hang the knight on h5, or taking with the bishop would allow the move g4. Even though black can give a piece in these positions, it is a worse version than what could have happened in the game. So similarly, after knight to d7, taking on f5 is very strong for white. That's why black decided to leave this knight on e5, but the way that Kasparov did it is really the typical way that Kasparov would play in sharp positions, which is by either creating a threat in every single move or by capturing something. So all of the following moves made by Kasparov are just aggressive moves. So first of all, Kasparov played the move b5. So even though white might take on e5, black has this idea of going b4, forking the two knights. That's why Korchnoi decided to take on b5. And after pawn takes, now again there's the idea of going b4. That's why Korchnoi simply captured the pawn on b5. So now Kasparov followed up with another aggressive move and captured a pawn on e4. So first of all, black grabs an important pawn, a central pawn on e4. Additionally, after white ever takes on e5, now the rook will be active on the f-file. And here Korchnoi captured the pawn on e4. Let's evaluate some alternatives, because here we definitely have other alternatives for white. First of all, taking with the knight wouldn't be strong because now we see that this knight on b5 is hanging, so this position is quite playable for black. But the main question is what would happen after pawn takes e5. Why not take a free knight? And here the idea is that after bishop takes, we see the main idea of this sacrifice, that black gets a lot of activity. With this bishop and knight, they are eyeing this pawn on g3, so taking on g3 is a big threat. Additionally, the queen is ready to join the party. Even queen to h4 is an idea because the pawn on g3 is now pinned. And it is very hard to defend this pawn on g3 because after a move like knight to e2, the knight on b5 would be hanging. And if white tries something like rook takes, now black would capture the rook, and then black would still have a very strong initiative against white's king. So this is just a very complicated position. I would probably even prefer to play as black here because black's moves are very natural, just attacking moves. So taking with the bishop makes a lot of sense. White still wants to keep the position under control before taking the knight on e5. And here Kasparov again followed up with an active move, played the move bishop to d7, attacking the knight. That's why here Korchnoi decided to defend the knight with the move queen to e2. But in any case, let's evaluate some alternatives. First of all, I just want to mention that the cold-blooded knight to a7 was a very interesting alternative for white. The idea is that the knight will come back to c6, and there will be quite annoying for black. So this was a very interesting move, maybe a bit hard to play. And the other main alternative for white here is to capture the pawn on d6. So this seems to be a free pawn, but here black has this very nice idea of queen to f6, attacking the knight, which doesn't seem to have any good squares to retreat. And now the pawn f4 is pinned. Actually here this position is so complicated that taking on e5 is an idea, even though black might capture on f1. Black wins the exchange, but white already got a bunch of pawns. And there's even the idea to try to defend the knight by going rook to a6. And here black has ideas like going knight to f7 or knight to c4. These are just very complicated positions. The point is that after knight takes, black wins the exchange, but white still gets a few pawns in return, so these are just very complicated positions that could have happened in the game. But queen to e2 makes a lot of sense because, again, white wants to keep the position under control, whereas black wants to create a mess in this position. So queen to e2 is a very natural move, and here Kasparov again left the knight on e5 and played the move queen to b6, putting more pressure on d5. Korchnoi played the move knight to a3. And it seems that now black is running out of fuel because it is a bit hard to create more threats, but Kasparov still decided not to move the knight. So here a move like knight to f7 again is very passive. Now black can play the move g4, start kicking back black's pieces and getting an advantage. But Kasparov found the very nice move rook b to e8. So just creating some x-rays against the queen on e2. And again we get what Kasparov was looking for, just a mess, because all the lines are quite complicated and white can go wrong quite quickly. So Korchnoi played the move bishop to d2. In any case, let's evaluate the capture on e5. Here again, black would simply sacrifice the piece to get threats against white's king, for example after rook takes and rook takes. Here white can try knight to c4, attacking the queen and the bishop, but after bishop takes, king to g2, now the queen might come back to the king side, and again this position looks very hard to play as white. But here I think that a move like queen to g2 was a very natural move, just getting away of the x-rays against the queen. And in this position I wonder if Kasparov would move this knight, or if Kasparov would ever move this knight from e5 if Korchnoi didn't take it. Let me know in the comments what you think about it, if Kasparov would ever move this knight on e5. Because here after the move bishop to d2, Kasparov took this pawn on b2. So this was just a tactical mistake by Korchnoi, but it was just more subtle than giving a pawn for free, because maybe Korchnoi here wanted to follow up with rook f to b1. But the problem here is that Kasparov has this very strong move of knight to f3, finally moving the knight, but now black is just attacking the knight on c3 and again creating some threats against the queen on e2. So here first of all, black is given a check. After bishop takes, rook takes would capture the queen with a check, or after queen takes, now black can take the bishop on d2 and this queen is not getting trapped, and now there's even this idea to capture the knight on c3. So in this position, rook f to b1 doesn't trap the queen, and here Korchnoi should have just admitted his mistake and played something like queen to g2, keeping the game going. Black simply got the pawn back, but this is still quite a playable position, but instead Korchnoi finally captured the knight on e5, which in this position is even a worse version than before, because now black even captured a pawn on b2, and this queen is actually quite active on the second rank. So here after bishop takes, Korchnoi played the move knight to c4, which seems to be quite strong because it attacks the bishop and the queen, but this was probably just a routine tactic for Kasparov, who played the very nice knight takes g3 with the idea to create a discover check after knight takes e2. So here grabbing the queen wouldn't work because after knight takes, black gives a check, and then black captures on c3, black gets the piece back, and it's even 2 pawns ahead in material, so this is just a winning position for black. So after knight takes, Korchnoi traded on f8, and after rook takes, queen to e1, now black captured on e4, black got the material back, king to g2, bishop to e5 is given a check, so king to g2 was played, and here Kasparov played the move queen to c2, so black already got a winning position, but the drama doesn't end here because Korchnoi managed to complicate the game quite nicely. He was a fantastic fighter, so the game is not over. Here Korchnoi captured on e5. By the way, taking on e4 was not possible because the knight was pinned, so black would capture on a1. So here Korchnoi captured on e5. And in this position, Kasparov had to be quite precise, and Kasparov played the move rook to f2, which wasn't as convincing as the move knight takes d2. So this was a very strong move. The point is that after knight takes, knight to f3 gives a check and attacks the queen, and after queen to e2, black simply plays queen to h4 and then captures on c3 with a winning position. But instead after knight takes e5, Kasparov played the move rook to f2, giving a check and planning to take on d2, but Korchnoi came up with a very interesting queen sacrifice after queen takes and knight takes. The idea was not to take on f2 but to play rook to a2. So white is getting a lot of pieces for the queen, and white's pieces are defending each other, and here Kasparov played the move queen to f5, and after knight takes e7, the idea is that after queen takes and king takes, we get a weird material imbalance where white gets a rook and 2 minor pieces for a queen and a few pawns. This is still probably better for black, but white might manage to hold this position. So Kasparov decided to play the move knight to d3, which makes sense, planning to go queen to f2. I just want to mention that knight takes h3, so the materialistic approach here would have been good for black. But knight to d3 seems like a logical move. Now black has the idea to either capture on d7 or to go queen to f2, attacking white's king. And here white had an amazing resource. White played bishop to h6, which as we'll see was not a good continuation, but here white had this idea of going rook to a8 and after king to g7, rook to a7, trying to create some threats against the king. So this was again very difficult to find because here black has the very tempting queen to f2 and after king to h1, black might capture on d2, and this seems to be game over, but after knight to e5, white is just getting a sort of perpetual check against the black's king. If the king goes to the 8th rank, then the rook will simply give checks, since the king cannot go to the 6th rank. For example, after king to f6, white has ideas like knight to e4, forking the king and the queen. Or after king to h6, white starts giving checks. After knight to g4, king to h5, rook takes, will drive the king to g5, and after knight to e4, we get a fork, and it's even white the one who is winning. So after knight to e5, the game might continue king to g8, rook to a8, king to g7, and rook to a7, so we might get this kind of perpetual. In any case, it was a really difficult resource to find. Because after bishop to h6, black simply takes the knight, and after rook to a8 and king to f7, white doesn't have any good follow-up. Rook to f8, for example, would not be a checkmate because black has king to e7. And after rook to h8, Kasparov played king to f6, defending the pawn h7, and after king to f3, queen takes. Here Korchnoi resigned because white's position is just desperate. So this was just a very crazy game where we really see Kasparov in his element. There were some inaccuracies from both sides, but actually this might be what makes the game more exciting. So I hope that you enjoyed this game. If you did, I have another video where I analyze another exciting game played between Korchnoi and Kasparov that you might want to check on the right side.